Hello? Hmm. Oh.
Oh yeah, we rejoin here muted, which is normally good, but as the presenter, I have to remember. That's great. Like the technology worked pretty well. And the host ended up staying here, which is also fine. Jen, I don't know if you can see the breakout rooms pop up. If you click on it and you can see like who's in what room, that's great. I could use your help. If there's a room with only one person awkwardly there, then one of us should probably join that one.
Okay, you got it.
Thank you.
It looks like the breakout rooms are closing in 13, 12, 11 seconds.
That's funny. Mine says 4 seconds.
Oh.
Close enough.
6, 5.
All right, and we're back. So glad we could say hi to each other. All right, without further ado, I'm ready to start the content. Any other messages from Jen or Ben?
Ben, did you want to? Oh, you're muted.
I was just going to introduce New Haven IO for anybody who hasn't come across it before or came across it on the meetup. Basically, we're dubbed as kind of like the water cooler for the New Haven tech scene, just sort of like a general space for different events and conversations surrounding around tech in New Haven. And we're looking to try and signal boost any local events, any tech events. So please let us know if you're interested in hosting something. And we have a Twitter at New Haven IO and our website at newhaven.io. And we have a highly active Slack, a lot of members. And if you have any interest, there's quite a lot of channels, and it doesn't have to be programming specifically, but there's channels for a lot of languages and interests in tech. So feel free to drop by our website and you can join our Slack as well. And as Jen mentioned, there are the Women in Tech events and channel in our Slack as well.
Yeah, if it's your first time, welcome. We're so lucky that New Haven IO exists. It wasn't even a thing yet when I started programming in like 2010. And it's so cool that we have this community going on now with the Slack and all these meetup events. Take advantage of it. I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, and thanks for hosting this, Casey.
Yeah, my pleasure. All right. We're recording this, but also feel free to take your own notes. And I have a reference that I'll point to a whole bunch with a bunch of notes. Let me paste that in the chat sidebar now, preemptively. Here are the notes. I also pasted these notes in the meetup on that meetup page. So if you lose it, you can find it there. All right, welcome to my talk. This is Debugging Your Brain. This will be a workshop. Before I jump into the content, I want to introduce myself. Hi, I'm Casey. I like to blow bubbles a lot. Here's a bubble party I'm throwing in DC's DuPont Circle. I take my crate of bubbles, and whoever is coming by or whoever comes to the event Just blows well. That's it. That's the entire event. I love to sing and dance and play instruments. I have an instrument in every color. That's me on the bottom dancing in New Haven in a church. Probably on Church Street, I think, actually. At the top is me teaching at Yale University programming like 10 years ago. The bottom is me teaching in DC, where I live now. I've been in tech 10 years, recently at USCIS and Heroku, and I've done a ton of roles, including product manager, engineering manager, front-end development, back-end, user research. It's a lot of fun. I like knowing all these different perspectives and skills. Lately, I do freelance work. I'm an independent consultant. I do employee training and coaching. Back at Yale, I studied neurobiology, and here's some of what the research I helped with was. I'm co-author in a few papers. This was kind of erasing memory, but of course, absolutely not, because science, and there's a lot of nuance there. So I did not erase memory. But that's like the direction that the research was going in. All right, the structure of this talk. We're going to be alternating between me presenting, talking to you, some solo activities where you'll think on your own and then put comments in the chat, and then some pair activities we'll use breakout rooms for. We're going to start with what to debug in your brain, and then go into how to debug it through 5 stages. All right, what are we even talking about debugging? What's the problem? There's a type of experience you probably have had pretty often this year in particular, and that's a downward spiral where you have negative thoughts and they make you have negative feelings, which lead to more negative thoughts, and it gets worse and worse and worse, and you feel terrible, and it's counterproductive. And we really generally want to avoid these. We want to short circuit it and stop it. We'll cover techniques how to do that. By the way, I made that in Blender. Super fun. I love that open source software. Another term is rumination, similar to downward spiral, is when you're in a bad situation and you're focused on the causes and consequences, the bad parts, instead of focusing on solutions and being productive about it. Ruminating is counterproductive until you realize it's happening and shift gears. I'll give you 3 examples from my life. 1, having an argument at work. I had an idea to solve a problem. My coworker had a different idea, and we didn't agree with each other. And then I started feeling like maybe I'm a bad coworker. Am I being too pushy? Am I not being pushy enough because it's important for the users and the clients? Then like considering them, like worse and worse and worse. An downward spiral from there, you can imagine. A second example, once my mom was talking to my brother. He'd left the door open and she got upset with him and yelled at him and then felt bad about it. And then she felt worse and worse and worse. Like, am I a bad mother? That scenario. We'll go into that one more a little bit later in the talk. And a third example, I was headed to a meetup. I was hangry, wet, and late, and I stepped in a puddle, and I had thought all sorts of nasty things. A very bad state I was in. And we'll come back to that story too. So our first activity here. Well, first I want to give you some guidelines for the activities. We have 2 types, individual and pair. For the individual ones, you'll think quietly to yourself and then paste your response in the sidebar chat or type it there directly. For the pair ones, we'll assign you randomly into breakout rooms. And then usually one person will share and the other person listens, and then you'll flip roles. And the instructions say that each time. If you have trouble in any breakout room, click on return to main room, which is somewhere in that bottom bar, and come back and talk to the admins, the moderators. That's the best way to get help. All right, first activity. I'm going to set a timer for 2 minutes. I'd like you to come up with 3 challenging experiences from the past month when you had or almost had a downward spiral or you found yourself ruminating, and share those 3 experiences in the chat. And then I'd like you to pick one that we'll use for the future activities too. And here are some ideas for prompts right under it if it helps you brainstorm. If you have any questions, by the way, I have the chat up. I'm monitoring the chat, so feel free to ask questions there. All right, I'm setting a timer for 2 minutes. And start. right, 20 seconds left. All right. I'll read some of these. An idea at work wasn't received well. You start thinking, am I even good at my job? Not being as productive as you want to be, feeling like you might get fired and lose the house. Oh yeah, catastrophizing. Being short-staffed at work. Is everything falling on my shoulders to get done? Good question. Might feel that, huh? Oh, a lot of work content, totally. Am I making a difference? A financial issue? COVID hurting? Or am I doing everything I can? Comparing yourself to a standard, totally. Waking up late, being upset at level of productivity, eating spree and self-shaming. Yeah, totally. These are all stressful. Well done. Hopefully you'll feel better about them by the end because we'll think through them and talk through them. If you didn't already, I'd like you to pick one of yours that we'll use for the future prompts as we go through. By the way, in the notes that I put here in the chat sidebar and on Meetup, there's this page. You might want to have that open even during this workshop because the prompts are at the bottom. And when you do a breakout session, you may or may not actually see the text I have on the side. So this will help you to have those discussion prompts. I'll put that again in the chat sidebar. You should have this open in a tab. It also links to a bunch of other resources, like an overview of all the concepts we're going through today, so you can have as a reference. In the middle is a worksheet that you can use to go through a specific issue. And this is pretty similar to our prompts that we're going to go through, the exercises. And then on the right is like a bit of a reading list and one-time exercises you might do. All right, tons of resources. Anyway, my big question is how can we help more people effectively deal with challenging experiences like the ones you just listed out? How can we help people learn those skills? One way is therapy. If we get more people to go to therapy, they'll learn skills to deal with these very effectively. The therapist is like a personal trainer for your brain. They get to know you and help you learn techniques that work for you, ideally. But of course, there are a lot of barriers to getting that therapy. Within therapy, I pull ideas from two types of therapy in particular. Cognitive behavioral therapy, which is the most popular, most common one overall. It's used to treat tons of mental illnesses, almost all of them, it seems like. It might be more interesting to list ones it doesn't help with because it just helps with so many different problems. For depression, for example, it's as effective as antidepressant drugs, one or the other, according to some studies. I like to reframe it though. It's not that it has to be therapy in a therapy setting. The skills from CBT are generally useful for everyone. So I like to call this cognitive behavioral training. You're just trying to train yourself to be introspective and mindful and thoughtful about your responses to things. Another therapy that I get ideas from is dialectical behavioral therapy, in particular, the 6 levels of validation, which you can use on yourself or others to help them feel understood. And we'll go through those. There are a bunch of barriers to getting this therapy yourself. Even if you get over the stigma of therapy and you get over the financial barriers, the health insurance, You still have to find a good match therapist, and then it takes time and energy to go to therapy. Not everyone gets to go to therapy or can. If you're interested, I can encourage you to try it. They can do screening to evaluate whether you would be a good fit for therapy or not. But anyway, a lot of what we're going to cover today is supplemental to therapy or maybe instead of therapy if you don't need it. What are some approaches to learning these skills other than therapy? There are a few. There are books like Feeling Good by David Burns, which popularized cognitive behavioral therapy for the masses. It sold a ton of copies. A lot of people I know have read it. And a lot of the ideas from this talk come from that. I also wrote a book. This is the book I published recently. It has a lot of the same ideas of those two therapies, but condensed into a really short, like 80 pages or an hour and a half audiobook. I tried to make it super, super short. And that's basically what you're going to have covered today. We're going to go through the big ideas in that. I'm working on a board game version of the book too. So you can work through your thoughts and feelings, talking to friends and having them help you think through them and validate your experience. I'm looking for play testers if you know anyone interested. A lot of this talk, we're going to go through these stages basically from left to right. Introspection, identify inputs, articulating processing experiences, validation, and cognitive restructuring. It's this framework going to process experiences. So we're going to start on this left section here, introspection. To start, because we're a lot of tech people, software people here, we're going to model the brain as a system. It's what we like to do. Here is the most prototypical system, the Ipo model, input, process, output model. You might recognize this because it looks a little bit like a function. Functions have an input and they have a return value and they do something in the middle. You can model anything like this. For example, in a classic psychology experiment, Pavlov trained a dog to expect food when a bell was rang, and then the dog would salivate even when there was no food around, and he measured the milliliters of saliva the dog produced in response to the bell. So this is like an input and output. If a bell is rang, then the dog will salivate. And that's a way to model an animal and to study how the behavior works, behavior in response to a stimulus. We generally like to think that humans think all the time. We always have this process part in the middle, and we don't just respond to our environment. But that's not quite true. Often we're on autopilot and habits run what we do, and we are kind of just responding to our environment through our habits, which we've learned over time. In times of trouble, it can be helpful to switch gears into a manual mode, into a mindful state where you're actively in control in how you respond to your inputs. It can be hard to do that. So my favorite technique for switching gears is called whoop. So you might remember my mom yelled at my little brother for leaving the door open from earlier. So she was frustrated. And then my brother and I went, whoop! We surprised her. She knew this was coming. We'd talked about it before. She wanted to be able to switch gears to become introspective when she was very frustrated, so she could respond better, respond more how she'd like to, ideally. She took that prompt, she said, thank you, and then she entered an introspective state, which I often call the whoop state. She realized she hadn't eaten that day. That's why she was upset and snapping, not really because the door was such a big deal. It was a minor irritation, in addition to her angry state. So the whoop technique, I'd like to have you try it real quick. I'm going to count down 3, 2, 1, and then whoop. Whoop with me, everyone, even though you're muted. 3, 2, 1. Whoop!
Whoop!
Love it. Once you enter this state, I want you to celebrate that you noticed this was a good time to introspect. Whether or not you continue doing it, you might abort because you don't have time or energy in that moment, but you noticed this is an opportunity. And having that skill is huge. If you can just do that, it's a huge, huge step forward. And I want you to celebrate it. No, I want to skip that one today. All right, we just covered introspection. So you notice you should be mindful and you prompt yourself to do it somehow. It could be a whoop. It could be something else too, although that one's pretty memorable. Now that you're in this introspective mindful state, what can you do next? Next up, we're going to go through identifying inputs. What are the types of inputs to your system? Then we'll go through a bunch of techniques for how to process your experiences more fully. And then validation and cognitive restructuring I'll introduce a bit later. So how do we identify these inputs? I want to give you a mental framework that assists in this a little bit, the inner versus outer brain. I'll illustrate with a GIF. This cat turns around, sees a cucumber, and jumps out of the way. Ah! The cat has a fast jumping reaction, which may have saved that cat's life if it were a true threat. And then I like to imagine the cat came back later to investigate and see, is this truly a danger? No, it is just a cucumber. There are two systems in the brain, a fast one and a slow one. I often think of the inner brain as being responsible for the fast process and the outer brain for the slower one. Emotion, you can see, has a shorter path to go through than thought, has to go all the way around. That inner part is called the limbic system, and the outer part is called the cortex, the ones that I'm referring to for this response. Broadly speaking, feelings happen in that inner part, and thoughts happen slowly in that outer part. So that's the inner versus outer brain, your fast and slow response. All right, that'll help you remember some of these 4 inputs we're going to go through. I break these down into 4 categories of input, and then 2 categories of not input, things that you have control over in that middle. Yeah, those are under your control. These 4 are not under your control. Automatic thoughts and automatic feelings are ones that just happen to you. You didn't decide to think or feel those. Like if you stub your toe and you say a curse word out loud real quick, and then you feel bad and maybe guilty because you didn't clean up that thing and put it back. Those happen so quickly. You didn't choose to do them. You're not in control. They just happen to you as inputs. Conversely, what you think next, if you can flip into that mindful state, you can choose to think something more productive, or you can let your habits run and they can do whatever they want, potentially making you feel worse with a downward spiral. And you can influence your feelings by forgiving yourself, by understanding, validating how that happened to you. You can help yourself feel better through your deliberate thoughts. And then I consider that under your influence there, influenced feelings. There are 2 other types of input. Can you imagine what they are if they're not thoughts or feelings? Another one is external stimuli. The object that you stubbed your toe on is definitely an input to your system. Any events that happen, anything people say or do are external stimuli as well. And then there's a special 4th category, which I think about a lot, and that's bodily state. The best example of that is hangry. Like when my mom was hangry, that is definitely an input to her reaction. That's the state that she's in. And it's not quite a thought or a feeling, and it's not something external to her, but it's still pretty important. So if you get a poor night's sleep, or if you eat too much junk food, or if you're too caffeinated, those are all going to affect your bodily state, which definitely affect your response to situations. Here's another way of viewing it. Automatic thoughts and feelings are in your head. Bodily state is also part of you. And there's also external stimuli outside of you. One way to get better at identifying all these inputs is mindfulness. In particular, you can go to Mindfulness Meditation, and that can help you learn to identify these thoughts and feelings as data in a non-judgmental way, and to get comfortable with the discomfort of interacting with them. Mindfulness in general is well studied, and mindfulness meditation is just one approach to get to that result, which is pretty straightforward. There are a ton of apps, books, and practices all over that you can use for this, and doctors sometimes prescribe it. My primary care physician literally prescribed mindfulness meditation for me a few years ago, and it helped. It's great. All right, we're at another solo activity. For an example listed earlier, the one that you picked, I'd like you to identify inputs from each of these 4 categories. And you don't have to decide for an input which category it is. These 4 are just helping you think broadly so that you come up with all of them. For example, on the right, you can see one of my examples. I'm going to set a 2-minute timer for this one. And I'd like you to put your comments, your responses in the chat. And if you have questions, feel free to ask those too. Yeah, relating to your problem statement. Oh, I guess for your example listed earlier. That's what I'm trying to say here. There we go. Good question. All right, we're at time. I think I set the timer a little short for that. I'm going to give us 30 more seconds. Nice answers, everyone. I love seeing you explore all these different sides, all these different types of input. Now that you all have answered that, I'm curious, did one of these four surprise you in investigating the scenario you just looked at? If so, which one was surprising in this case? For me, each one surprises me at different times because my focus is just not on all four at all times. So I miss one pretty often until I double check.
I think in the moment, I definitely feel, I definitely have those automatic thoughts and automatic feelings, and they're I'm aware of them, but looking back on it, I don't reflect on them, I think.
Oh, sure. Yeah. It's like you knew it in the moment, but you didn't think more deeply about it.
Yeah, I kind of just default to the first, or maybe like, yeah, maybe the idea of what I was feeling.
I think for me, Casey, it's often just not paying attention to my body or the external stimuli, right? Like I don't like recognize that as playing a factor at all when it almost always does. I mean, I don't, I don't live in a space free of matter or
Well said.
or things. Yeah, those are usually the two that I don't pay attention to.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, both of you. For me, it's sometimes the opposite. I'm so focused on trying to get all of it that I sometimes focus on bodily state. I say, oh, I must have a tummy ache from something I ate. And then later I find out, oh, I had an automatic feeling that was bad. I didn't want to look at right away. So sometimes I have to come back to that one when I think a lot of people are the opposite. Anyway, we all vary in what we can identify. And so I love this activity to help me check out what I'm missing when I'm taking stock. Well, thanks for participating, everybody. I love all this in the side chat too. All right, next section is on processing experiences. So at this point, you took a moment to introspect, either during the event or afterwards you're looking back on it. You took a moment to think about what your inputs are. You've gone through those. And now you want to process it more deeply and like put more of it into words. How can you approach that? I guess before we go in, I'll give you I'm not going to time this one, but how do you normally process an experience? What do you normally do? I'll go through a whole bunch of options you have, and I'm sure what you do is listed here somewhere, and I hope there's more. We're going to go through all of these one by one. Thinking. A lot of people get through a lot of their problems by thinking, but it has this major pitfall. If you just think and you don't do any talking or writing or any of the other techniques, you're more prone to have the downward spiral and rumination because our minds are wired to do that, to focus on the negative more than the positive. And it's harder to escape this if you're just thinking. I'm not suggesting you should never just think about a problem. A lot of what we do is thinking. We don't always have pen and paper. We don't always do the other techniques. But if it's causing you stress and you find yourself downward spiraling and ruminating, you may want to consider another technique than thinking. It's the weakest of these for that. My favorite one of the whole set is talking to a friend, because there are just so many layers in which this can help you. We'll go through, I think, 4 or 5 layers. I'm going to go through them one at a time here. Here you are on the left, the robot debugging your brain, and your friend is the one on the right. If you're talking to a friend, first of all, talking at a friend. If you're just saying words out loud, that's making you put them into words and then put those words into the world, which makes them more real and less slippery. That's powerful on its own even. If you're talking to a friend and you ask them to actively listen to you, they can reflect back what you're saying and say, oh, it sounds like you're feeling blah, or it sounds like you felt you were thinking this about the situation, and they reflect back, and then you know they understood you. So it's like registered with another being, and that's another level of power. You can ask them to actively help you beyond just active listening. You can ask them to brainstorm with you ways to put your experience into words. You can ask them to help you think about solutions. They can help you think about other perspectives of people in the situation. Anyway, they can be an active ally if that's what you want in the moment. And that's like a third layer of power. If you don't have a friend around, you can still use your mental model of them and imagine their response. If you were to talk to them about the situation, what would they say? I just did that last night with a friend. I was like, I don't know the answer to that. What would a friend say? Oh, they'd say this. That's brilliant. Like a third friend I was thinking about in the time. I'm glad I have their model in my head. That helped. I do this pretty often at work when I Slack a friend, a coworker. Like I start typing a message to them, and then I realize I figured out the problem, but just by putting it into words to this person who I'm imagining their response for, and I already solved it. I don't have to send the message. Or sometimes I'll write an email draft to someone that I don't have to send either. So it's like imagining a friend and writing it. All right. Those are my favorites, are talking to a friend or imagining talking to a friend, and that's very powerful. Sometimes I talk to a duck or a cat or a plant. just by saying the words out loud, again, just like with the friend, it helps you verbalize it. So you put them into words, and those words are in the air. You can imagine if the duck were sentient, or the cat or the plant were really thinking about your problem with you, what would they say back? All right, another technique is writing. You can get a lot of benefits from writing. First of all, putting the words down on paper just gets the words to exist. And then even cooler, you can reread the words. They can reflect it back to you perfectly because that's what you wrote on paper. You can also use it to edit and refine your language until it's very clear and exactly what you meant, conveying your experience pretty well. All right, and another category is reading. If you read fiction that feels relevant to your life in any way, the characters are going through trouble, or if you read nonfiction, like Ask a Manager blog, the podcast, I think they have some stories that are very related to my work stories, and that can be really validating too. So in that case, you're not even talking to them; you're just getting it from that. This is particularly useful for scenarios in which I don't have friends who are experts in the thing. Like when I was an engineering manager, I knew a few, but they weren't like my closest friends that were engineering managers. So reading things online was a great way to get that context and validation that I couldn't necessarily get from people I knew. All right, this is going to be a pair activity. We'll do breakout rooms. We'll do, what did I write here? 3 minutes plus 3 minutes. The prompt is also in the Google Doc, and I'll paste it in the sidebar here, so you should have it, except sometimes Zoom loses it, I know. All right, there's the activity. For your story, which processing techniques did you use? The list is right here. Thinking, talking with a friend, talk with a duck, writing and reading. What could you have used? What ones do you want to try next time? So you can talk about your story for 3 minutes each. I'll send a ping into the room. It'll be a banner at the top at the 3 minute mark to switch roles or whenever you feel like it. And you'll come back here in 6 minutes. Again, if you have trouble with the breakout room, just come back to the main room. We'll help you out. Breakout rooms. All right, I'm opening the rooms now. Kevin, do you see the join room button? Or did you have trouble?
I don't think I'm in a breakout room.
Trying to see. Jen, Mike, Matt, LC. If you don't want to participate in the breakout room, that's okay. But
There's
you're
no
having trouble.
invitation for breakout rooms.
Say that again?
There's no invitation for a breakout room.
Oh, interesting. Zoom, zoom, zoom.
I think I'm not getting them because of I'm a host,
Yeah,
and then anyone who's a guest might not.
I'm seeing Matt and Kevin in room 2. I don't know how to ping you again.
Yeah, it's yeah, and it says not joined, but they're all there.
Oh man, technology. I'm clicking buttons. I don't see the button I want.
I don't know how to like put people in rooms. Like I assigned the room, but well, I'll
Okay.
try to join room 2 and see how that goes.
Cool. Kevin, do you see any button at the bottom that says breakout room?
No,
You might not.
participants and chat and share.
Okay. Sorry, I'm missing the activity. We can do it in here. Does anyone feel comfortable sharing?
Related to the scenario that we gave
Right.
earlier. I can go. I'm happy to go.
Great. Okay.
So for the scenario where I felt like really defeated because people weren't hearing my ideas or taking them seriously on a project, I guess I thought about it. It's usually my default is thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it. And I thought about it. It was like on a Thursday, I think. And I thought about it Thursday and Friday and Saturday and Sunday. And by Monday, I was okay. And actually, I remember when my husband came home, he was like, "Do you want to talk about it?" And I'm like, "No." I just didn't even want to. I didn't even want to get into it, but perhaps I could have. Perhaps I usually do talk to him about that stuff. Talking has a way of making problems seem smaller, but I think that it's a larger issue of this. This fits a narrative in my head of like, I think there's organizational problems that don't have a lot to do with me, but I'm kind of trapped in the in between the cogs of the machine or something like that. So yeah, did I do it right?
Yeah.
I did it right?
Great. Well done.
Okay.
Good
Thanks.
sharing. Thanks for sharing.
Sure.
Yeah, often I don't feel comfortable talking right away, personally. It takes me some work first. So I relate to that.
Yeah, sometimes talking makes me angrier.
Sure. What would you try next time? Same thing or anything different?
I don't know. I mean, I think, like I said, usually my go-to is to talk to my husband or like my sister. But I didn't this time. And I just kind of like let it ride. And that was okay. It just lasted a long time, like the feelings, I guess. So yeah. I don't know. I'm not sure what I would do next. Maybe talk with a duck. That's one thing I definitely haven't tried. Or my cats. My cats are pretty, they're around a lot, so captive audience.
Yeah, I'm always thankful when I try to talk to a duck or any object. This plant is pretty good, but I don't always think about it right away. Of course, it's not like a go-to for me either. But I'm amazed every time it works because it does. Cool. Welcome back, everyone. How was the breakout room experience there?
Mine was great.
Pretty good. Pretty good.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think it was awesome.
Thank goodness. We had some technical difficulties here with people not getting to the room. So I'm glad you all have made it that one smoother. Oh, what was a takeaway you had in the breakout room you were in? Anyone? What was something surprising or interesting someone said?
I like how when I was speaking with Ben, he talked about bullet journaling and speaking about writing. I thought back to when I was younger writing. I used to write a lot and it made me want to go back and write again. So now I have something to look up. I've never heard of it, bullet journaling, but I will have to try it.
Awesome.
Yeah, I felt like I was in a lot of agreement with Vera and talking about talking things through with friends as well.
Cool. Thank you. All right. Ready for the next technique? All right. This one is expanding emotional vocabulary. So you know a lot of words, everyone does, and you probably use only a fraction of them, of course, because that's how we as humans communicate. We know more than we use. Ideally, we would have this whole palette of beautiful emotional vocabulary to use to describe our experiences, both to others and in our own heads to get things straight and clear. Here's one visualization that I like. Here's another one, it puts them in a circle, it has nice colors. But my favorite of all is this one, which puts the most common emotional vocabulary terms into this tree structure. So I can zoom in and say, all right, I'm angry. What kind of anger is it? Is it a type of disgust, rage, exasperation, or irritability? And I can zoom in. Maybe I'm just grumpy. That's a pretty good term. I like the word grumpy. So I use this reference on Wikipedia sometimes to figure out just the right word. And I find this to be a lot more helpful than a thesaurus, which gives me a blob of words, none of which seem quite right. This is one tool that I used. It's also linked to in all the resources, that exact article. All right, we'll do another breakout here. Share your story, the same one, using more nuanced emotional vocabulary than earlier. Feel free to help each other brainstorm ways of describing the emotions. You can both pair on it. You can use that reference emotion classification, which is linked to in the notes, and I'll put it in the sidebar here. So you can have that handy. Cool. This will be 2 minutes plus 2 minutes. And for some people, the breakout rooms aren't working. So we'll say, if you don't get the invite, we'll do a big breakout room here in the main room. And we'll start that right away instead of fiddling with the tool any. All right, and rooms are open.
Whoop, I was by myself, but then someone joined at the last minute as soon as I left.
Oh, man. Yeah, I see some people shuffling here. We can keep you in this room. The other ones are full now. Is anyone else here who wants to participate? All right, I'll be your pair. Would you mind going first? I set the
Oh,
timer.
you're talking to me?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So my challenge was just work related, feeling like not I'm not good enough at what I'm doing. And so if I could translate that into more nuanced emotions by group, I'm just kind of looking through it now.
Mm-hmm.
I would say sometimes shame or uh, I don't know, none of the tertiary emotions seem to jump out there. Um, just neglect. Nervousness. Yeah, that's a big one. So I guess that falls under fear. I didn't really think about that category. Um, I'd say that's probably a dominant one.
Yeah, nervousness.
Because it's a lot of uncertainty about all the different things, um, reinterpreting signs that are, not necessarily clear. You're just trying to uh, come up with a interpretation.
Yeah, totally. And the uncertainty would make someone nervous. That sounds right.
Yeah. I wonder if there's some other ones.
Is apprehensive kind of right or off?
Apprehensive.
Ooh, or worry.
Yeah, definitely. So what do you typically do once you have these more, you're able to group them in different ways? How does that help you overcome the issue that you're trying to, or maybe that's the next step and I'm skipping
Good
ahead.
question. If I'm talking to a friend, usually the right word helps me convey it. A friend may have guessed that you felt disappointed or shamed or regretful. And if that's not quite it, when you use the more accurate words like worry, it can help convey that more clearly.
Yep.
So communication is a big one for these. It also helps me distinguish between like this experience has me worried, but the other one have me feeling rejected, which is different. Although it felt a little similar at first, maybe. So in mine, I can share my example.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I was emailing someone I wanted to connect with and talk to about professional things, and they didn't answer me. And then they checked my LinkedIn profile, and they still didn't answer me. And I didn't know what I felt at first. I felt like worried. Am I worried about something? I'm worried they don't like me. I was feeling kind of rejected, like they rejected me as a professional, as a peer, as a person. None of which I know is true because they didn't talk to me. Maybe they're very busy. Everyone's busy. I can come up with reasons why they might have done it. But like rejection feels closer to me than worry. And something about that helps me feel more certain about it and like explore the situation more deeply. Like, when else do I feel rejected? Is this like a theme in my life when people don't answer me? Do I feel rejected a lot? Yeah, so like the clarity helps me get
It
clarity.
helps identify if it's a bigger issue to work on or something like that.
Yeah.
And then convey it.
Right. And communicating to people. People at first thought I was just disappointed I lost that opportunity of a connection, but it was more than that. It felt like rejection. Like it's not just what someone might have expected. Yeah. And I don't know, just being able to put it into words.
Such an easy one too.
Feel better.
When you have something like that, where they just don't answer you, it could be 9 million different things, but it's so easy for us to just make that connection instantly, that,
Totally.
they're just rejecting us or something.
Right. And then I talked to a friend about it, and he helped immediately ask, like, they're probably very busy. They're probably maybe not sure how to respond, or they would have needed a longer response. And I don't know, he had a million ideas that I would for a friend too, but I didn't for myself, of course. Not right away.
Right.
I think the friend helped me come up with the word rejected too. That's great. Cool. People are trickling back in. Cool. How was that? Any takeaways from the breakout session we just did?
It went well. Jen and I talked, and we were kind of discussing different ways that maybe directly defining an emotion instead of being more like generalized with it can kind of maybe help you bring to light certain things.
My feeling was that there's kind of like an empowerment, a self-empowerment of like naming things like I mean, even in like fantasy tales, right, or fairy tales, like when you name something, you're kind of like, or like what was that, the never-ending story, right? When the childlike empress gets a name, and that's a whole thing. That's being able to correctly identify something and say what it is makes it smaller in some ways and more easy to deal with.
Yeah, well said. I love that. That was the theme in my breakout too. Like what's the purpose? What's the value? And we came to like, it's empowering. For us, we also said it helps you identify patterns in yourself too. That's something I noticed. When I got no answer to an email, I felt rejected, which might be a more general thing too, like feeling rejected in people. I don't know, something I might think on later. But I might not have noticed if I just said I was worried in general.
Could I comment on? Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh no, I talk too much in general. So.
Well, since you muted yourself, no, thinking back on what you guys just said, and for me, it was almost the opposite. It's so weird. I'm feeling, feelings of just feeling inferior at the moment, not feeling like I'm doing my best, not feeling like I'm worthy of, my position right now. And I started to think back to times when I was younger and felt that way and thought like, oh, is this like something that isn't resolved yet? It turned into a little bit of a therapy session. Didn't mean to do that. Not that it got overly emotional or anything like that. Right. But no, so it just made me think, how maybe what we're dealing with now and the way we're thinking about them could connect back to other moments earlier in life, right? I don't know. Did anyone else feel that way?
That's actually what I was going to say, was that how does these kinds of reactions, especially the automatic feelings, right? Do they stem from narratives that you've told yourself since God knows when? And are you just kind of telling yourself the same story that doesn't really serve you, but it's just a story that you tell yourself, and like this debugging thing, I think maybe is about editing the story and maybe disrupting it or something like that.
Yeah, I love it. I'm going to give a refactoring metaphor at some point. That's my editing in. I want to say offhand that therapy is very, very good at exactly that. And like looking into yourself and why you are and how you are the way you are, and if what you can change to improve your life. That's what it's really good at. And you can do it on your own some amount too. We're humans, we have these powers, but the professionals are the best at it. But talking to friends can help you work through it a lot too. And a lot of people shy away from sharing their feelings with friends. It's one of the things I'm always talking about. So just because they're the best doesn't mean they're the only way to work through these. But if you get to your limit at any point during this workshop, feel free to say like, I'm going to pause on that, not talk about that right now, and that's totally okay. All right, next section. We have 2 sections left, one on validation and one on cognitive restructuring. That fifth one is the editing part in particular. Oh yeah, I love doing this. I always forget without a slide. Anyone who doesn't mind, I'd love to take a group photo. Who's here? Feel free to get your hair ready or not. It doesn't matter that much. I'll tweet this to the New Haven IO account. I always notice my hair is like floofed because I don't know how to deal with long hair. I've never had it before the pandemic. All right, anyone else want to join?
Same here. I started clipping my own hair, and I realized after the first time I cut the top that whatever, I'll just let it grow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I tried a little bit too. Right. We're in. I'm about to take it. You ready? Where's my camera? There. Okay. 3, 2, 1. Cheese. There's a bit of delay. Okay, we're all looking and smiling. Mostly smiling. Anyway, it's as good as I can manage to do online. Thank you all for participating in the group photo. It's good to see your faces too. Feel free to turn them off. It makes meetings easier. I'm thankful some of you have it on because that helps me pace myself too. But I know it can be exhausting. I understand. All right, next section, validation. By the way, we have less than 20 minutes left. So I'm going to do one of these two activities and not the other one, and I'll pick it soon. All right, validation. This concept, I want to define the word before we jump into any of it. It's accepting another person's experience as understandable, whether or not you agree with them, whether or not you would feel the same way, whether or not you have the same premises that, or not. If you can follow them in their sharing of their experience and the steps make sense, you can validate them and say, that makes sense. You can validate other people. You can ask other people to validate you. Say like, does that make sense? You've probably said that before in your life. You can also validate yourself and say, my experience makes sense, not only because I'm experiencing it, therefore it's true and it happened, but because of these reasons. We'll go through a framework. The 6 levels of validation are from DBT, although I kind of reshuffled them because there's a lot to digest. Forget this one for a moment. We're going to go through these. I cut it up into 2 halves, listening in general and validation, which is saying it makes sense. The listening will look familiar because when you talked about talking to a friend, it's the same steps. The lowest, oh, by the way, these are in order of lowest to highest power level, like the impact it could have on the person. The ones at the top are the lowest power, the ones at the bottom are the highest power. But you can't always use the highest one because it's not available as an option. If it hasn't happened to you too, in your life, you haven't had that experience, you can't relate on that level, and that's okay. You can do the one under it or the one under that, whatever is possible. The lowest level is just being present. So here your friend is debugging themselves. They're on the right there, and you're the one on the left listening. Or in this case, not even listening. You're just present with them. Maybe it's in person, maybe it's over text or on a phone call, and they're just being silent. Your presence is validating. It's like observing them as a person, being with them, being available. It's supportive. Sometimes that's all someone can handle, including you. Sometimes you might not want to say things, but someone's presence could be supportive for you. Anyway, that's the lowest level. That's still something, it's a good option. But sometimes you can do even better. If your friend is willing to talk, you can just listen, silently even. You don't even have to respond sometimes. Sometimes people just want to talk at someone, and that helps them put it into words, like when you're talking to your cat or plant. Sometimes they do want some feedback, some response. So the next level is accurately reflecting exactly what they said in your own words and not adding in anything else, just like you're with them in their storytelling, actively listening. I like the word reflection here because it's like sending back what they sent to you, which is different than the next level where you are trying to fill in the gaps. You're carefully guessing what things aren't they saying that you see that they might not see yet. this can be tricky. You can't always do it. Sometimes the best you can do is accurately reflect because they're not ready to have anyone guess, and that's okay. Sometimes they're open to it, and it varies by relationship and situation and how you approach it. I have 2 ideas to help you approach this carefully. Before I tell you the 2, guessing wrong is harmful. It's like invalidating. It makes them second guess themselves and their view of reality, and that's not what you want to do. If you're going to guess wrong, don't guess, just reflect. But if you can guess correctly, then it can be super validating. It can be way more powerful than just saying things back to them. Some people complain about the caricature of a therapist. They just say back to you what you said, and they're not even trying this level if they're that caricature. But it's tricky, so it makes sense they might want to be careful. All right, the difference, the way you can be good at this is to leave room for correction. So if you suggest ideas, ask them questions, and they can correct you when you're wrong, that can make you able to guess right, and it's easy for them to tell you when you're wrong, so it's not actively invalidating them. And I have 2 techniques to help you guess with room for correction. They're pretty similar to each other, but they're a little bit different. The first one here is the open-closed spectrum. So with the most room for correction would be an open-ended question where you're not even guessing, really. So they can just say whatever they are. The most closed at the bottom there, that is so unfair. I'm like asserting it. And if you want to disagree with me, you have to say no, and then correct it. And that's hard. That's hard for people often. Varies by person and situation, of course, but that is going to be harder to correct. I tend toward the middle, where I suggest something and explicitly leave room to be corrected. Did that feel unfair? And people are very good at saying, yeah, or no, and then filling in the gaps. So like I'm helping a little bit, adding a little bit here. I'm not just reflecting, I'm adding some, but with room for correction. All right, second technique is very similar. It's explicitly saying my confidence level with terms like imagine or guess or must have. I'm sure that felt pretty bad. Here, the more confident language you have, the harder it is for them to correct you, but the more powerful impact if you're right. So I use the middle of this one too, of course. Sometimes I use either end of the range. I just tend toward the middle when I'm not sure. All right, for time reasons, I might pair this activity with the next one. So this is the listening chunk, and then the other one's validating, and we can do them both in one session, and I'll paste that into the sidebar chat. All right, we just covered the top half, listening. Those are the 4 levels. Next, we'll go through the different levels of validation, saying it makes sense. The lowest level is saying it makes sense for you based on your past. For an example, when I was a kid, my family had dogs. They were lovely, and my friend was afraid of them for some reason. Eventually, he told me he'd been attacked by a dog when he was younger. So of course he'd be afraid of dogs based on his past. It makes sense he would be. Even if he doesn't want to today and wants to get over it, that's irrelevant. He is based on his past, and it makes sense. A higher level is saying it makes sense for anyone in that situation. If my dogs were snarling and growling, anyone should be afraid of them because they're showing that they're a threat. And I might validate his based on his past and amount, like acknowledge it, but it's more powerful to say anyone would than to say, oh, it makes sense you'd be afraid. It's like saying only you versus anyone. Anyone's more powerful often. And if we're walking down the street and a dog is snarling on the other side of a fence, maybe looking like they might jump over the fence, I might also be afraid. And to share my response is even more powerful than saying, yeah, people would be afraid of dogs jumping, snarling over fences. Say, oh, I am too. So visually, those 3 make sense based on your past. It makes sense for anyone, or even better is including yourself in it. Me too. And not just in theory, I would. That's closer to anyone anyway. But I have experienced that. Or I'm with you walking past the dog and I am afraid. That's even stronger. So for the next activity, I'm going to have you go through these and try to validate the other person using whichever one of these you want to try. You won't get through them all probably in the time limit. I'm going to have this be one-sided for the purpose of time. So one of you will share and the other one will try to validate. I could have an entire day workshop on this and it would be a lot of fun, I think. We're doing the abbreviated version here.
You definitely could.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to paste the instructions here too, actually, and then I'll send you to the rooms. Listening and validation. I'm putting them both in. The times are wrong because I'm fast forwarding, but I'll have you do 3 minutes for one person to do one side of it instead of it would have maybe been, I don't know, longer. All right, opening rooms, and we'll have one big room here again. All right, I'm here in this room. Anyone else here want to participate? All right, I'm going to join a room then. I'll see you all in a couple minutes.
Feelings.
Hey, everyone, welcome back. I'm going to go forward with the content instead of sharing what we just talked about. I guess one more comment on here is it can be a progression. It's not always the best if you start at the very top one. You want to like listen to their story before you start saying, it makes sense for me. I've had that experience. You don't want to make it about you. But I encourage you to try all of these in different orders and skip some sometimes and just see how they feel. This is a tool belt for you. You can ask for support of this kind, like, can you listen to me? Can you help me put it into words? Can you help me make sense of it? Can you help me find solutions? You can ask for specifically which of those you want, if you are aware which one you want. They're all listed under the resources and cognitive restructuring. We can get through this real quick. This could be a whole day workshop too. Brains have shortcuts. Sometimes they distort reality. They don't reflect reality very well.
Casey, did you want to be sharing your screen?
Yeah, thank you. I forgot it would
You're welcome.
strip that away. Cognitive distortions. For time, I'll just give you one example. I was going to a meetup, hangry, wet, and late, and I thought lots of negative things that have lots of distortions. Here's my favorite one. Today sucks is overgeneralizing the entire day, disqualifying all the positive things that happened, and predicting that nothing else positive will happen the rest of the day because I'm in this negative state. There's a whole bunch of these distortions. If you can identify what they are, first identify like this has a smell, a code smell, and you want to change something about it. You can then counter them by saying like, I'm feeling frustrated and they can get better, and stop yourself from downward spiraling. And the more you do this, the more you're like reprogramming your mind so that you have these thoughts automatically instead of the counterproductive ones as much. This kind of self-talk can change the way you experience the world. It's super powerful. I recommend looking these up and printing this one. I also have a page on my website that lists a whole lot of these. I think these are fascinating. I want to go through the summary now. We breezed through that. The book Feeling Good covers them in a lot of detail. It's like really good at cognitive distortions. That's one of its strengths. You have this resources index that I shared, a lot of resources. If you want to get updates on more articles and graphics and videos and more talks like this, you can sign up for those on the website. That's in the notes. We cover the techniques, getting into your debugger breakpoint of introspection, identifying the inputs to your function, editing the function, processing experiences, validation, which is like your tests, unit tests, and cognitive restructuring, refactoring the code to make it readable. It's a lot like programming. Introspection, you can use the WHOOP technique to hit that breakpoint. For your inputs, you can think about the 4 types of inputs that we went through. For processing experiences, you can talk to a friend, a duck, write, or read. And all those are better than just thinking. When you're talking to a friend or to yourself, you can use these validation levels to help them feel understood. By the way, I do have a longer version of this content on Friday for an hour. I'm doing a workshop on just this one section. If you're interested, I can put that on the meetup event too. And there are a ton of cognitive distortions in the mind, and you can use these to reprogram your automatic responses to things. You might want other tools like a therapist. The Feeling Good book that I recommend, Calm and Headspace are good mindfulness meditation apps. If social anxiety feels relatable to you, Joyable is a good app for that one. They have a screening survey on their main page. It's the only app that does CBT online that I've seen. And of course, I wrote a book with all these concepts in more detail, but still pretty short. If you want more of me speaking, I have a lot of other talks I do. Prioritization workshop I'm doing tomorrow. Matrix-based prioritization for stronger team alignment. I have one on team health and psychological safety, how to get your team to work together really effectively, using a lot of validation techniques and more that apply to the workspace. And I do individual coaching for managers and employees, like career coaching or talking about your current job, how that's going. This was the Debugging Your Brain workshop. Hope you liked it. If you want to connect with me, I'm on Twitter and LinkedIn pretty actively, or you can email me.
Thanks, Casey.
Any questions?
Could you tell us about the bubbles that you mentioned at the beginning?
Yeah, I love bubbles. I've been blowing bubbles in parks for a long time. I think the first time was on Yale Cross Campus. A friend bought a bunch of sticks and string, and we put it together. I would carry little pocket bubbles, like they're very, very tiny, and blow them at students when they were studying for finals. And it was delightful. They loved that. I still carry bubbles pretty often. I just blow them randomly all the time. Bubbles make people so happy. Everyone loves bubbles.
Yeah, I look out my office window. Well, last year I used to look out my office window, and there was just a very weird stream of bubbles coming out from somebody's driveway for just hours. It was just bubbles coming into the street.
That's
it was
amazing.
Really weird. I had to record it. It was so,
That's great.
it was so interesting.
I think I have 5 types of bubble machine. I just keep getting them as gifts at this point. It's great. I'm curious, what are your biggest takeaways? What was the most surprising or interesting or most impactful on you that you think you'll try?
I liked the whoop. That's a nice just reset button. Very simple but powerful.
Yeah, I'm glad you liked it.
I liked your use of the blender, that image, because that's exactly what happens when you allow these little everyday things to become negative thoughts. And so I remember that image just stood out. I thought, oh, that's exactly what happens, because one thing turns to another. And then, just when I was listening to, debugging the brain, right? Like what we need to do, what steps we need to take. I thought, man, this is so simple. But when you think about putting it into play, it can be tough. So taking that time, like Ben was saying, to write and to really just reflect a little bit really does go a long way. So I really appreciated everything you shared. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else want to share a takeaway?
Yeah, I have one. I liked how you, I guess, quantified the like assurances that you give to someone when you're validating what they're saying. It's something that you do instinctually, but how you broke it out, it'll make, I feel like I'll think about it a little bit more and maybe catch myself when I say things that aren't even really congruent with how things are in the real world. Like, you might make a generalization like, oh yeah, everyone should feel that way, but it's actually not true, and then you kind of feel awkward about saying that afterwards. I don't know. That was just my takeaway.
Cool. Good. I'm glad that stuck. That's my favorite part, the validation levels. When I read that for the first time, I was mind blown. It's like, finally, this is a good approach.
I totally agree with that as well.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. You can make it gives you the tool to realize an error that you've been making, which you're blind before. Maybe that's how I felt.
Yeah.
I think in these times as well, the more that we can validate each other's experiences and just signal in some way or another, like, you're not alone. Mental health is such a tenuous thing these days. So, anything that you can do for your fellow human being to validate their experiences is just a plus in the column of life, I guess.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. This year has been the hardest and will continue to be the hardest, even post-vaccination. I'm so glad you all are open to doing this for yourself and for the people around you. It's huge. Just tangentially related, did anyone see the shrimp saga on Twitter? Shrimp in Cinnamon Toast Crunch. It's hilarious. You should look up this thread. There is so much on Twitter about it. There was a New York Times article. The biggest part that relates to this talk is the company, the Cinnamon Toast Crunch company, gaslit the person saying, that's not shrimp tails, that's sugar. And then he's like, no, that's, you're wrong. That's like, gaslighting is so invalidating. It's like infuriating. I'm so glad he stood up to them and called them out. And I don't know, it made me very proud. Be like, no, my view of reality is true. You can't tell me otherwise. Fortunately, Twitter is on this guy's side. Yeah, it's disgusting. It's all I've read about online today. Everyone's take on this. Do I have anything else? Oh yeah, a lot of people ask, can I get other people to do this stuff? And if you're wondering that, kind of. You can model the behavior from this talk. You can share your experience doing these things and how helpful it is, and that can help influence people. But you can't make someone do it, especially if you're thinking of a person in particular you wish would do all this. They may or may not be open to changing in these ways. Another option is to share resources like books and podcasts and articles you find that are related to this. You can share them with people, and that might help nudge people in the right direction too. I hope you do. I hope you like evangelize being introspective and mindful and thoughtful and validating and all that. Well, that's the end of my content. I'm happy to stick around and chat more if anyone wants to.
Thanks.
Or you're free to go. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Casey.
Thanks so much, Casey.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Have a good night.
Good to see you.
Thank you again. Bye.
I'm going to be laughing at the Cinnamon Toast Crunch shrimp saga all night. This is just horrible.
It's horrifying.
Oh my God. Ugh. Okay, I can stop the recording now. Yeah, and I think if I leave the meeting, I think it still exists. So you guys can keep talking if you like. Casey, thank you. This was really great.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for being so supportive.
Great. Thanks for doing this. All right. Well, have a good night.
Have a good night, everybody.
Yeah.
Bye.